normally you have a hit, and if the rights haven't been sold just through word of mouth before the show opens, certainly right after the show opens. But the studios thought, well, we can't do this. It has too many censorship angles. Now, of course, that would not be the case today. But in 1947, 48, this was a major problem because we still had the so-called Hayes office, which was the Breen office, really, which was the industry, the motion picture industry's self-regulatory body. Call them the censors, but they brought this about so that they'd hold off state and city religious censorship by doing their own. So you had to submit scripts, you had to submit the cut of the film. You couldn't work around it. And they had to adhere to the production code. So, you know, they thought, well, in order to do this, we'd have to make so many changes it wouldn't be A Streetcar Named Desire anymore. You know, it would be a totally different. So there wasn't any great interest. But Warner Brothers decided to do the film. And, you know, everybody's on board. Tennessee Williams is going to be involved with the adaptation. And then the script is submitted to the Breen office, and it's, hey, gang, you have real problems here.
There were things in the play that we could do that they weren't going to allow. And Kazan was trying to hide as best he could those moments. And there were moments when he said, that's what the play's about, and you just can't do it. You just can't hide it.
So they settled on 3 items having to do with this adaptation. The least of the problems had to do with Blanche having been kicked out of her little town because she had taken up with schoolboys and so forth.
Meetings with strangers was all I seemed able to fill my empty heart with. I think it was panic. Just panic that drove me from one to another, searching for some protection, here, there, and then, in the most unlikely places.
So that's muted, rewritten so that it's hard to believe you don't get the picture, but it wasn't hitting it on the head of the nail. So that was okay.
I loved someone once, and the person I loved, I lost.
Unfortunately, if you don't know the play and haven't read it, there are some things that you don't understand, particularly the true sense of Blanche's guilt in relation to her young husband, because even the concept of homosexuality could not be touched on film, much less the word, good heavens. And this was, what, back in 1950, 51. And Tennessee had to rewrite that scene that Blanche has with Mitch, explaining about her relationship with her young husband and of his committing suicide and her guilt in relation to that.
There was something about the boy, a nervousness, a tenderness, an uncertainty.
I remember when he brought out the rewrite, and Vivian looked at it and she said, oh my God, she said, you mean I have to say, you disgust me because you're a poet?
I didn't understand why this boy who wrote poetry didn't seem able to do anything else.
The third big problem is, of course, the rape scene. It was something that bothered the censors. And they had all kinds of things. Well, maybe the rape could be a fantasy in her mind, but it doesn't really happen. That wasn't going to fly. And then it was maybe he should attempt it, but not fully consummate it. And this is really why Tennessee wanted him to do the movie. He had a little experience with Hollywood directors coming on and, you know, just saying, okay, well, that's what they want over at the Motion Picture Code, so that's what we'll give them, and I won't fight for it. You know, he knew Kazan would fight for it, and Kazan fought ferociously for this. So it came down to, with the rape scene, well, so long as it's tastefully done, you can do it.
So finally they come up with the usual compromise, right? The compromise in this instance, which apparently Kazan came up with, is that the rape will take place, but it'll be done very carefully and, you know, by indirection, and the mirror will be smashed, and you're not going to see any actual aspect of the rape.
But in order to allow the rape scene to be left in, they had to make it seem as if Stella was leaving Stanley and would never come back.
Blanche,
Come on, honey.
you touch me. Don't you ever touch me again.
Well, she would never leave him. Their relationship would never be the same again, but she would certainly never leave him. But he had to be punished in order to leave in the rape scene.
I'm not going back in there again. Not this time. Never going back. Never.
Hey, Stella!
Those were the basic things that were cut and changed before we ever started shooting because of the censorship.
Though the Breen office says, okay. Now they still have approval of the final edit, so that if they don't think the rape was handled properly, and so forth and so on. All right, so now we start to shoot. And it shoots for about 2 months, a little over schedule. And the editorial process is going on. And now we come to the sneak previews.
Have you got a light? Sure.
And the scene with the newspaper boy was actually a scene that gave him some trouble because it had gotten laughs, it had gotten bad laughs. And the problem was, an older woman and a very much younger boy, it always makes people laugh nervously. And it was making that happen. So Kazan actually had to recut that scene a little bit and basically turn it around so that it's almost as if he's a fantasy for Blanche, You almost never see the boy. But, it wasn't a big problem for Kazan. I don't think they even had to do any reshooting. I mean, he had stuff in his outs that he could rebalance the sequence and it would be fine.
I want to kiss you just once. Softly and sweetly on your mouth.
So then the Breen office finally passes it. Okay, they've seen the final cut, they've passed it. And Kazan is off because he's doing Viva Zapata at Fox for Zanuck. And he's going over there. In fact, that's what Alex North was originally coming out to do, was Viva Zapata, but then Streetcar intervened. So he's off. And, now the picture, is being put to bed and negative cutting and all the rest of it. Suddenly, the Legion of Decency, which was established in 1933 by Catholic and lay Catholic people to kind of protect, the Catholics from, and also to implement this production code, which was non-Catholic, but it was an industry-wide thing.
You have to separate the Legion from the Code. The Code people were really in business to make sure that they didn't get in trouble with the Legion. I mean, that's how the power of the censors worked.
So suddenly he's hearing that the Legion of Decency is going to give this a C, or condemned rating. Now, what that meant is that all Catholics would be advised not to see it. Not only advised, but told not to see it. And a lot of theaters wouldn't play it. And of course, that would also open up the possibility of other censorship elements from cities and states and groups and so forth getting in on the act. So of course, Warner Brothers was saying, what do we do to avoid the C rating? And they, at this stage of the game, they wanted to compromise, obviously, because they've had a lot of money invested in this film. It's ready to go. It's ready to be released. So there was great apprehension. And they brought in this man, Martin Quigley, who was a publisher, but had also been a lay Catholic, who had also been involved in this Legion of Decency and also involved with the production code. So they brought him in to kind of act as an intermediary. And then they sent the editor, David Weisbart, back to New York to meet with him. And there were some specific areas that had to be modified, not reshot, but modified, mostly editorial, to cut out or to restructure, such as Stella descending the staircase.
Hey, Stella! Hey, Stella!
And then, so you didn't see the expression on her face. That had to be played in a long shot. And then Alex North was brought in to literally rescore that particular scene.
The scoring he wrote originally was a very, sultry, evocative piece that worked just astoundingly well. I mean, it was shockingly emphatic to the scene and insightful into the lust that was the foundation of the relationship between Stella and Stanley. But of course, that ultimately was the problem. They came down with a ruling that this piece of instrumental music was too carnal and suggestive, and must be removed from the film. And so he ultimately had to rewrite the piece, predominantly revising it with a string orchestration, and that was what was included in the original theatrical cut of the film.
Don't ever leave me, baby.
Also, there were a couple of lines that were taken out.
According to which that what belongs to the wife belongs to the husband also, and vice versa.
Oh, but you have an impressive judicial aim.
You know, if I didn't know that you was my wife's sister, I would get ideas about you.
She's what?
Don't play so dumb, you know what.
All right. Cards on the table.
We're talking about his desire. Just brutal desire. The name of that rattle-trap streetcar that bangs through the quarter. Up one old narrow street and down another.
Haven't you ever ridden on that streetcar?
It brought me here. Where I'm not wanted. And where I'm ashamed to be.
Then don't you think your superior attitude's a little out of place? A man like that.
I told you I love it. I tremble for you.
I want to kiss you just once. Softly and sweetly on your mouth. I want to kiss you just once. Softly and sweetly.
I stayed at a hotel called the Tarantula Arms.
Tarantula!
Yes, a big spider. That's why I brought my victims. Yes, I have had many meetings with strangers.
Well, maybe you wouldn't be bad to interfere with.
Stay back. Don't you come toward me another step or I'll...
You what?
Some awful thing will happen. And
What are you putting on now?
But, you know, certain things you think, well, what difference did that make? But at the time, somehow this, they felt, would make a difference. Well, when Kazan, and of course they didn't want him to know, but he eventually finds out, you know, and he looks at it and he's unhappy. So he seeks an audience with Martin Quigley.
Kazan had these meetings with him. And Quigley kept saying to him, moral issues must, in all movies, take precedence over aesthetic issues. And he was convinced that he was saving Kazan's, at that moment, in his mind, unreleasable movie. And Kazan offered all these compromises. Couldn't we play day and date, your cut and my cut, in theaters near each other? Couldn't I take it to Venice in the uncut form? He was invited to the Venice Film Festival. And Kazan argued with him, but got no support. Jack Warner's just glad to have a picture he could put out. He was probably a little afraid that his entire investment was going to go down the drain.
So, as Kazan said, that was it. It was a closed issue. And the thing is given a B rating, which means objectionable in part for all. But that's okay. It will get played in all the theaters and, you know, et cetera, so we're off the hook. But all of that cut material was rediscovered several years ago. in a can where the original negative was, but not marked. So here were these trims that were able to be put in very carefully to where they belonged. So now the picture was able to be reissued and put into Laserdisc videos, and now, fortunately, DVD, the way it was before the Legion of Decency put their cuts in there.
But Kazan felt, he said, I remember talking to him after they found the missing 4 minutes and put it back into the release print. He says, it doesn't make any difference, does it? He says, you get it, don't you? And you do. That play is substantially emotionally intact on the screen.